Hello, Uganda. Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hotseat on 933 KFM. I welcome you, our listeners, across this beautiful land, the Pearl of Africa. My name is Patrick Kamara. Tonight, we're looking to the rule of law. My guests this evening are all lawyers, and they're lawyers at a higher level, I should say. These are men who have done law for quite some time, and let me introduce them. I have Mr. Francis Harimugasho, who's the legal consultant, managing partner at Hamak Advocates. Francis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I have the human rights defender, executive director, Chapter 4 Uganda, Mr. Nicholas Opio. Thank you so much for joining us, Nicholas. Good evening, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back here. And the one fact about both of us is that we all served as secretaries of the Law Society at different points in our lives.
And the Law Society,
this is a reunion of secretaries.
The Law Society seems to be in the eye of the storm lately. But it's in November. Every November we have the Rule of Law Week. But you have been, all of you are human rights defenders. As far as, I'm going to begin with you, Mr. Harimugasho. How do we stand as a country in the rule of law?
If it is my opinion that you seek, on a scale of 100, we are struggling between 45 and 47%. And there are multiple players. I think later we shall delve into them. The state itself, the population, and civil society. So we have different failures that have made us fail to cross the 50%. We are doing badly on the global scale.
Oh, and why is that? Because we have a country that's supposed to be a democratic country. We have a country that has a constitution that is supposed to be good. We have the arms of government that are around and they're working. Why are we? Because 47 really is performing below the mark, in my view.
Yeah, to me it's performing below the mark. First of all, it begins with our legislators. What type of laws are they sending to the judiciary for enforcement? And the policymakers, what type of laws are they proposing to Parliament? Whose interest do they serve? Do they serve the majority of the citizens, or they serve a small cartel that has kept itself in power, is getting more power, and wants to keep in power for generations after generations? So you see the quality of legislation we are receiving as a country first is below the minimum. Possibly we, the people who elect the members of parliament, may also be to blame, because you will not get a fishmonger to go and legislate about human rights because he's popular and can give free fish at the shorelines. The quality you'll get is the quality of a fishmonger in parliament. And we need first chest thump as a population and say the quality we are sending to legislate for us is bad.
Are you aware that the parliament that we have now is actually the bigger percentage are men and women who are well educated with masters and sometimes PhDs and at least degrees? I hope you know that.
Yes, I know that.
So what do you mean? Is it the level of is it the quality of education? Because if it comes to getting degrees and masters degrees, they do have.
It's not an issue of papers and masters and what. I've had chance to teach at Law Development Center and other institutions. I see the quality of students we are teaching, and we have many certificate-giving institutions in this country than knowledge-instilling institutions. Somebody just has a certificate in psychology.
The education that we're getting. Let me come to you, Mr. Nicholas Opio. You have been a phenomenon in defending the rights of Ugandans. Sometimes
others may disagree.
Yeah, it's okay. That's the nature of debate. But so, how do you rate our performance in terms of the rule of law in Uganda as a country?
Well, first of all, I think we have to break down the concept of the rule of law, because many people out there may not understand what the rule of law is, because it's a term of trade.
Lawyers can speak about it without much thought because they take these things for granted. In a broad sense, the rule of law, as distinguished from the rule by law, is a situation in which the law governs society. The law applies to everybody in society. The law is known in society and is simplified as a simple guide of public conduct in society. That is really, at a basic sense, what the rule of law is as a concept. Now, broken down in granular details, there are constituent elements of what constitutes the rule of law. Okay? First is the overall respect for the rules, that we're all governed by the same rule and nobody is above the law. If you break it, you suffer the same consequences, no matter who you are. Whether you are a prime minister or a farmer in the village or a seller on the roadside, if you break the basic rules of society, you must suffer the consequence. The second thing is that there is, of course, the equality before the law, that everybody is treated equally before and under the law. There is no preferential treatment on the account of social status, on account of wealth, on account of religious belief, ethnic identity, or other identities. We are equal before the law. There is the aspect of social justice, that the law expresses itself to ensure social harmony. In other words, it helps to foster social harmony in society so that if you are driving on the road, we all know what the rules are. Nobody should be driving on the shoulder, in walkways and pavement just because they're driving a government car. That is the element of the rule. The last one is about corruption and the availability of social services, equitable access to social services in a country. So those are the things that constitute the rule of law. And if you are assessing the state of the rule of law in Uganda, you must assess it in view of all of these standards. And thankfully for many of us, there is an instrument that is applied in determining the rule of law. Every year there's what is called the Rule of Law Index that measures the state of the rule of law in every part of the world, run by some law experts. And don't take my word for it, look at that index report for this year. For this year, Uganda continually ranks below many of the African countries in its standard of the rule of law, respect for the rule of law. They score us against all these benchmarks. There is pervasive public corruption that goes to the highest office in this land. And corruption indicates the abuse of public office, abuse of public processes. There is still, to date, disappearances of citizens in this country, enforced disappearances, pervasive use of torture as a means of dealing with. There is a challenge of access to justice. Many people, by the court's admission in its annual report, only 10% of Ugandans use the formal justice systems to be able to resolve disputes. And so the state of the rule of law in this country continually continues to decline. And you can attribute many factors to that decline, and none is more important than the political dispensation in this country.
All right. Thank you for that preamble, that background, to really bring us to speed on understanding what the rule of law is. And what you have stated, if I go back to Francis with your 47%, you may need to revise, maybe.
He's a generous lecturer.
Downwards. So when those parameters really, when he was talking about a common person able to even ride a border following the rules, they will be going against or any other person now is having a say when they don't need it, or somebody who is everybody doing their own thing. Probably 47 is being very generous, 47%.
Well, I'm known for being a generous person, and I will not reduce my generosity, but still it is below average. We can do better. And we are in a state, even where the laws we should be following were legislated with bad intent. And people have reached a level of outbursts. In history, we have had outbursts. Colonialism had its own set of laws to keep us under colonial rule until people outburst into rebellion. Key examples that I may point at, after Idi Amin took over power, we know some people who had outbursts. One of them was actually ruled by Idi Amin one day. The next day he was in Tanzania seeking support. In 1980, we have young men, 27 of them. They were tired of the corruption of the day. They had an outburst. And even recently, in our own Uganda Law Society, lawyers had an outburst. They entrusted somebody who can abuse people who are not willing to listen to how society is being governed. In a landslide victory, the land members of community said we would rather trust the person who can abuse, because that is the only time.
They're about to have another outburst.
Yes, that's an outburst.
They're about to have another outburst. I can see it is forming.
The Honorable Eli Karanga is a fantastic storyteller. A decade ago at the Annual General Assembly of the Law Society, told a fantastic story when the Law Society was trying to, dismiss somebody who was contesting for office on account of the fact that he was a thief. And he said in his village in Chiruhura, a similar thing happened. Somebody was being prevented from contesting for LC because he was a goat thief in the village. But the villagers were wiser than the lawyers and said, no, we should hear him out. So the man came and addressed the village and won the election. So his fellow citizens voted for him. That might be the case of the Law Society.
Okay, you don't have to point fingers. You never know.
All of us are.
But you all fallen short of the glory.
We are all falling short of glory.
We are all complicit in this situation.
Look at even South Africa, when they would not stand apartheid. You know, apartheid was law.
Yeah.
But the legislators were not legislating for the people. So the Nelson Mandela group had an outburst. So we are at that stage where we need to manage outbursts.
Yeah.
Soon we shall meet people naked on the street. Because if you are not legislating for me, I will reach a time where I can no longer take on the drama nonsense you are sending to me. I will have an outburst. I will not control how I outburst.
So Nicholas, where is the biggest problem? Is the biggest problem propagated mainly by those who have the mandate to lead, who are now leading in total, sometimes in disregard of the law, or everybody else has fallen short, including the man on the street?
You know, I find wisdom in the famous statement of the Honorable Ambassador Dr. Olara Otuno when he uses the term comprehensive brokenness. I think we're in a state that statement describes adequately the situation of comprehensive brokenness across the social structures of our society. I mean, look at any small little society in this country and tell me if there's pockets of rule of law.
But you are still, gentlemen, you're still going to court, you're still defending people, you're still getting victories in court. It's not total brokenness.
We are lawyers representing 10% of the population that use the formal justice system. How about the other 90? Where do they get justice from? Where do they go? So what you see as court success, that in any event comes at great pain. Lawyers who practice the law know. Now you have lawyers like my friend Arima Gasho selling coffee instead of trying to practice the law, right? Because the practice of the law has become unprofitable, has become difficult, has become riddled with corruption.
Is that what you think?
Okay.
That's what I told you.
No, I know he sells coffee. He even has a security guard company, you know, and you wonder, what time do we have to practice the law? Because we're frustrated, we find a result elsewhere. So the point is that there's comprehensive brokenness. What you see as success in the court system are representations of very tiny measures of success. Tell me about my mother in the village, my grandfather in the village, who within a radius of sometimes nearly 80, 90 kilometers cannot see government authority. Cannot see government. There's no proper road, there's no medication, there's no health center, there's no proper primary school. tell me if that person really feels a part of this society and thinks that we have a rule of law in this country.
Mr. Nicholas Opio and Francis Harimomugasho. Gentlemen, we're going to take a very quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest this evening, I have Francis Harimomugasho, a legal consultant and managing partner, Ahamak Advocates. I have Nicholas Opio, human rights lawyer and executive director, Chapter 4 Uganda, discussing rule of law, weak ease and pain of access to justice. By the way, you gave us the understanding of what the rule of law means. And there are some people every year that give the index of where we stand. Mm-hmm. How does Uganda compare to other countries, to be exact?
So there are many indices that measure different things, but there's only one that compiles evidence about what they call the global state of the rule of law. So they have the measurable standards that I've outlined, restraint of government power, corruption, social services, human rights. And the one for this year, and continuously, Uganda has been dropping. Uganda ranks 126 out of 142 countries, keeping company with governments like Venezuela, Myanmar, Cambodia, Ethiopia. In fact, Uganda and Ethiopia and Djibouti are perhaps the only Eastern African countries in the lower quarter of the index.
That sounds very strange and shocking, considering that, it's a shocker, because I thought we are not, because what you are describing is a preserve of real totalitarian regimes, rogue regimes.
Yeah.
Is that where we are?
So if you then look at other indices, take for example the Freedom House Index that measures the state of world freedom and categorizes countries in three parts. The first is closed society, which is authoritarian repressive societies, and partially closed societies, countries teetering between authoritarianism and some form of liberal democratic order. Then you have the last one, which is completely free societies. The countries that rank highest are countries, the first in the world is Denmark. So it's Denmark, Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, Finland, rank around there. Uganda in that index is ranked as a partially closed society. What does that mean? The Freedom House analysis indicates that Uganda is the sort of countries that have some form of democracy. In other words, we are a pretend democracy. We are a democracy in form, in the sense that there are ritualistic elections, there are few opposition leaders in parliament. It is only an expression of a democratic society done to get some measure of legitimacy in the global world order. But that at the core of that is a repressive state. Is a state that has concerning levels of corruption, restraint on government power. Some of the things that happen here, the torture you see, the disappearances you see, is not different from what gangs
Nicholas,
places like Cambodia.
If that's the case, then the country wouldn't be able to attract any foreign direct investment. The country's economy would be in the doldrums. We somehow have an economy, I'm told, which is growing at a good pace, because I can imagine the rule of law has a direct bearing on the economy and foreign direct investment, and we seem not to be doing bad in that area. Because if the people of money think this place is like a lawless country, they wouldn't be bringing their money in the country. But somehow in Uganda, they do bring their money.
Actually, look at it the other way. In a lawless state, we're not yet at lawless, that's why I'm still generous at 47. In a country with liberal laws, let me call them liberal laws, you'll make more money. For example, let's look at money lenders. Do you realize that in Uganda, more than any other country, we have these online money lending apps charging 150% for 14 days, 8 days, and it's because there is no law. There's nothing you'll do. The law exists, but you'll find the company running those apps is owned by the real individuals who are the law themselves. So the returns on investment, when you look at most of these foreign banks, the money they are making, they can't make it in any other country. Actually, some just go to organized states with laws, get money, come here, just fix it around, lend it to government, Bank of Uganda, and the returns on investment are abysmal. The returns on investment are huge. They are sky shooting. You can't make such profit anywhere. So we are likely to attract more investors who come for the risk, because once the semblance of law wakes up, you saw there is a businessman downtown who took on one of these banks. If it was not for saving face that the infrastructure came in, the fact is the bank was acting illegally, and they were about to lose everything because of how they were working. But because it's only in Uganda where you can make such amount of profit, because of lawlessness, we won't even attract more, because the way investment is done in other countries, you will not make profit.
So, Nicholas, what explains the thriving, kind of vibrant business environment we seem to see, entrepreneurial spirit of Ugandans we seem to see, and of course the economic growth, at least the figures that they tell us, if really we are performing that bad, because I can imagine that has a direct bearing.
It is true, the rule of law has a direct bearing on economic growth and economic development of the country, okay? Because these things are interlinked. In Uganda, what you have is increasingly very low inflation rates. So the macroeconomic figures look excellent, but those statistics don't tell the whole story. It doesn't reflect the increase in the better state of living of ordinary Ugandans, okay? There is a concentration of wealth and resources in the hands of very few people. If you aggregate that wealth and put the rest of the Ugandans as numbers, the figures look good. But the socioeconomic conditions of people in this country are not getting any better. I have driven through Karamoja. I entered through Bulambuli and exited through, it wasn't Kabom, Karenga, the new, it's called Karenga, into Agago. And sometimes you think in a different country. We are building tarmac roads into Karamoja only to areas where we have discovered minerals. Vast majority of Karamoja is in dire poverty. Dire physical, like you can see it. You don't have to even read statistics, you can see it. But the second thing is this, and you've got to understand the inflow of resources from outside the country to invest. If you understand that, you must read a book called Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein. Okay? The capital coming in Uganda is a capital betting on us failing. Okay? And in return, the capture of important natural resources, the capture of institutional processes. Okay? We will not be surprised tomorrow if a public service institution is privatized or given out to private companies on account of the fact that you need to raise money. See what's happening in Kenya. They're giving away an airport to a Adani group.
The Uganda who is in trouble right now.
CEO is indicted in the US for bribery and corruption. That is a sign to you that people just give you debt knowing you're going to, in law we call it odious debt. I give you Kamara debt I know you can't pay. And
You're trapping me.
If you fail to, I'm entrapping you. So
that's the debt trap we talk about.
And the resources being invested in Uganda are odious debts. Brilliant economic imperialists understand this and are betting on us because they see our beautiful fertile land. They see our beautiful, well-endowed country. They want a piece of it, and they will take it as day follows night. They will take it. Let me give you an example.
We are mortgaging it without understanding.
We're mortgaging our future. Look at the debt responsibility for a Ugandan who is not even yet born for the next 20 years. We have front borrowed on their behalf. They have to pay. That's a burden we're going to have to carry.
So bad economic decisions that will, bedevil the lives of Ugandan, is that a lack of rule of law?
It's a symptom of the underlying problem. Because in a lawful society, for instance, Parliament will have thorough, proper scrutiny of our oil concession agreements, what happened? We would have a better idea who owns Uganda Airlines. I don't know if you bought Uganda Airline ticket.
Right.
If you buy it, look at your ticket. Do you know who runs it? It's Canada Air. It's Canada Regional Air. And yet people don't know this information because we are operating in an opaque system. The rule of law, which is supposed to engender transparency, public participation, is not happening. Some technocrats in the Ministry of Finance, a person I call the Noir economist, sit there and make decisions on our behalf. We even don't know what is we can't even hold into account.
How do you do your craft in such environment?
Yeah. You join them.
How do you do this?
In the spree.
Well, you don't have to join them because the absence of rule of law is the effect that you will not even know who to join or who not to join because you end up engaging survival gear. But not all hope is lost because we have an elite that had stepped back to let the fishmongers that I was telling you take charge. But where they stepped back, it's hot. It's a hotter seat than this one we have here. They have to get back now to the politics of their country. I mean, if I'm poor now, I have nothing to lose. I have degrees, PhDs, and masters. I will not wait for you to make for me decisions which are going to push me deeper into the abyss of lawlessness.
Okay, Francis and Nicholas, gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and we came back and will be asking, do we really have now that elite consensus on some of these issues so that we can take them on?
ATM.
Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My name is Patrick Amar, and my guest this evening, I have Francis Aharimu-Mugasho, legal consultant, managing partner, Ahamak Advocates, and Nicholas Opio, human rights lawyer and executive director, Chapter 4 Uganda. Gentlemen, your trade seems to be having a lot of trouble. I want to go to something that many have called controversial, because you have a Uganda Law Society president who has been getting a lot of flack, a lot of criticism for expressing himself in a language that some people say is not very flowery, is derogatory, whatever they have decided to call it. And now it looks like the Uganda Law Society is in the eye of the storm. I've seen a lot of negativity towards the president of Uganda Law Society, but also some people who are supporting him. So you as lawyers, you must be on a very unfamiliar territory as we speak, aren't you, Francis?
Well, we represent people's interests, and sometimes we have forgotten to represent our own interests. We have laid before you the abysmal state of affairs as far as rule of law is concerned, and how our president is representing us was a subject of elections, if we believe in democracy. Now, elections in a democracy present two options. One, do you want to be represented by the person banging tables, or do you want to be represented by a gentleman?
You have a choice.
You have a choice. For the record, I supported the gentleman, but the majority of lawyers spoke emphatically
So the legal rebel.
and said, since 1956, gentlemen have had a fair share to build a law respecting society, and we have had the same cry until 2024. And the majority of the lawyers, it is unprecedented. We have never had this turn-up.
Okay.
They said, okay, in whatever form he appears, he's the one who's going to bang the tables. These statements he made recently are the same statements he made to appeal to the lawyers. So before we have a personal discussion, we just know that lawyers in their majority, 2010 of them went and said, go and represent me.
He has the mandate of the lawyers.
He has the mandate of the lawyers. Done in a democratic done in a democratic process. Painfully, we the 900 of us who turned up and said, we do not want to be represented this way. We have to follow.
To fall in line.
To fall in line. Now, I've said, at the beginning, I said, where the rule of law has hit rock bottom, we have to make a choice. Do we send people to disrupt? And the disruption, you've seen in New Zealand of recent, there is a member of parliament elected. When she was given a platform to speak, she had all the English authorities and that he would use to persuade colleagues. You know what she did? She tore the law that was going against the people's will and started singing Kamata, Kamata, Kamata.
She went native.
She went native. Now, that is expression of discontent. So before I attack that member of parliament, I have to first say, okay, I will not power the baby with the dirty shower water. Let me first get to know why the shower water is dirty. So while I do not, sometimes it's embarrassing to know my president has referred to a certain office in the most vulgar of ways, I say, okay, am I going to discuss that, or I am going to discuss what has brought us here? We began well. Okay. We painted the state of affairs. Do we remain in the same state, or we shout that it's Kamata, Kamata, Kamata? What do we do? And what Semakad is doing, it's unfortunate. I have seen orators swinging around disowning him. You are called to a democratic election to ask who to represent you. And he was abusing everyone.
And he was using the same language?
He was using the same language in campaign. You didn't come. So now you are sending all tribes of letters disowning him. You are disowning him because he has come to your territory. I have seen 15 female associations of lawyers all writing disowning Semakade. But when some lady was detained, I will not mention her name, a new lady was detained without trial. There was no letter. A justice of the Supreme Court, you know who I'm talking about, was just tossed around. There was not even a cheat. There is a justice in Jinja, a judge in Jinja, who was just chased like a frog. There was no letter. Now, because they have talked about private parts, because they're the ones which will attract your attention. We are not talking about people in 1980, the 27 of them. For them, when they realized that the state of affairs was unfortunate,
they picked guns and went to books.
For them, they went to kill the private parts with their owners. Because that's the only way they would be heard. Now, this one is talking about them. It's uncomfortable. When I meet him, if I can dodge him, I can dodge him. But he's banging the tables, he's getting the attention.
Okay, it looks like what I'm learning from you is that let's not mind much about the words being used. Let's look at what is causing the anger to come out.
Yes, no, so words matter. Words matter. And you've got to look at this in two ways. First, private citizen Isaac Semakade abused the DPP in the same way during the lockdown. It was me, Aremu Gasho, who rescued him from CID headquarters up to 9 p.m. in the night. He was a citizen, he was expressing his views, but a president of the Law Society now adds a new dimension to these words. First, it makes all of us complicit because he was invited at a partisan political gathering as the president of the Law Society. He used that platform in our names to utter what we thought was derogatory language towards the person of the DPP. Look, I have my own quarrels about the DPP. The lady arrested me, sent me away to jail. But that is no license to abuse her womanhood, to refer to her tribe in derogatory words, by no less than the president of the Law Society. campaigns are different from governing. When you win elections, you don't only rule for those who have voted for you. You rule for everybody, including those who don't like you, who didn't vote for you. Unfortunately, my learned brother, I think, hasn't transitioned from campaign mode to a governing mode. Secondly, when you govern, you are working with institutions of government. He's talking about decolonization, but he's the head of a colonial institution with the Law
I
Society.
had a better solution. Disband, establish the Uganda Bar Association, because that is a colonial outfit.
Yours was seen as a bitter loser. and so this is the institution you have, enacted by an act of parliament. You cannot aggregate yourself the power to disregard the law. You expel the Attorney General, you expel the Solicitor General, you say you cannot be part of the Law Society, when an act of parliament clearly indicates that they are members of the council. In fact, somebody could argue now that the absence of those two officers from the council makes the Law Society not fully constituted, and therefore cannot exercise the duty and function of the Law Society. It would mean that President Isaac Semakade cannot exercise the powers of the office of the president.
Those two officers are not available.
Without a fully constituted council. So I think that the remarks of the president were unfortunate. And unfortunately for many of us, we are complicit. Now they're saying, look at those lawyers. That's what they elected. That is who they are. Many of us are not that. I have disagreements with state institutions, but I don't quote by their private parts. Whether we showed up when an injustice happens elsewhere doesn't mean we shouldn't show up in places where we think and feel passionate about.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're dishonest.
Gentlemen.
It's simply that this is despicable coming from the office of the President of the Law Society.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's look into what would are likely to be the implications of the arrest of Dr. Kizza Besigye from the Kenyan capital Nairobi, and he ends up in Kampala and not in Kamiti. Welcome back to 933 KFM, and this is the Hot Seat. My guest this evening, I have Mr. Nicholas Opio and Mr. Francis Harmumgasho. You know, I want to change gears now, look into the current situation that's surrounding Dr. Kizza Besigye. I wonder what you make of all this that happened to him. Apparently, he's abducted or arrested in Nairobi and ends up in a military court in Uganda. What do you make of that, Nicholas, as a human rights defender?
No. First, just to describe the situation, Nairobi has become a capital of abductions. Besigye wasn't the first. There were British nationals who were in Nairobi on UNHCR documents. Essentially, they're refugees, and people seeking refugee status.
The British?
Yes. They were Turkish nationals.
I remember the Turkish.
Abducted, turned up in Istanbul. He was en route to a third country as a refugee, on a refugee document. So Nairobi has become really an abduction capital.
I remember also something back, there was also assassination of some politicians from the
lawyers in Kenya representing high-profile cases disappear, show up dead on riverbanks, killed. So what's happening in Kenya should concern everyone. The second thing is this. The Kenyan government and the Kampala regime have an understanding, false or true, that there is a growing collaboration between the Kenyan youth, the Kenyan civil society, the Kenyan opposition, with their Ugandan counterparts, in ways that if it's allowed to fester, is going to cause them, those in power, considerable difficulties. And they have given each other a carte blanche to do whatever they're going to do to stem what they see as a threat. And Kizza Besigye fell in that trap. And unfortunately, in violations of every known law on extradition, on every known law on respect for fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals who have committed crimes or alleged to have committed crimes outside their jurisdictions, the actions would ab initio make the trial a nullity.
But you just in your first submission, you said Kenya is becoming like a play field of other countries to do what they want.
Yeah.
So why do you think the Besigye thing is any different? I mean, what was the interest of Kenya and Turkey? What the interest of Kenya and the British?
So the main thrust of that argument is to say that Kenya has become a lawless place, but technically is to say that Kenya has given counterpart countries carte blanche to do whatever they want to do for transnational repression. Because Kenya also had become a refugee
repression.
Yes, a refuge country for many people. I know many Ugandan LGBTI groups who are fled to Kenya, who are in Kenyan camps, who are in Kenyan capitals. I know many other people who fled Sudan, who are being persecuted at South Sudan, who are in Kenya. So Kenya had become a hub, a comfort place, because it's almost like a regional capital. Right. Now that is being completely torn apart by the Kenyan regime giving those countries a carte blanche to do whatever they want. Watch carefully. These issues are always preceded by meetings between the CDF of those countries and our own. Watch what's going to happen in South Africa. The CDF of South Africa just got here because the Ugandan regime also thinks that the diaspora community is the one responsible for sprouting up internal dissent, for NUP, for people power. They've invested so much money in scattering that diaspora. Without success, what's going to happen next is transnational repression of Ugandan diaspora in the hope that that is going to disable the funding channels and support for the political opposition in Uganda.
Yeah, for instance, I mean, the Kenyan government has said they do not know actually about how this Joe was abducted or arrested. Or are they playing it safe? Because if they know, then he shouldn't have been brought in Kampala, or should have been brought using legal channels. So probably he should be serving his time somewhere in Kamiti prison in Kenya. Did they work in cahoots? Did the Ugandan security apparatus work in cahoots with Kenya? Why is Kenya saying we do not know? In your view, what could that be the reason?
I'm one person who believes that if you deny something, you are given a second chance. Possibly you shift the burden of proof to me, who does not want to believe your plea of not guilty. And I do not want to venture into suspicions and say, okay, they were in cahoots, they were not. You know, sometimes it's just facts.
As a lawyer, if they said, we know he was arrested,
yes,
what would that imply illegally to them?
Illegally, it means you are in cahoots with those who are arrested, if you admit. Mm-hmm. But if you deny, me, I'm a defender of a person who says I'm innocent until contrary evidence. My problem with the Besigye issue is that in a civilized world, like we aspire to be in, which Uganda is, we have had our legislation that all suspects who are civilians should be tried in civilian courts. My problem is a civilian being tried in a court martial.
Is a retired military officer as a civilian like Yonda?
Yeah, that is a civilian. That is a civilian, and even if he was found with government stores, he would still be tried in civilian courts. But now it even goes to jurisdiction. Where do we get the mandate to find government stores in Nairobi and come and try in Uganda? But my emphasis here should be civilians should be tried in civilian courts. I would sleep comfortably if Besigye and Haj were tried in Uganda Road Court. I know good lawyers will go and argue the case and win because there is no evidence. But what hurts me and where we are going as a country on a wrong trajectory is civilians being tried in military courts. It sets a bad precedent, and as far as the movement towards civility is concerned, we've taken another 20 steps back.
Okay, and still, Francis, if you can just give us your concluding remark on the show tonight.
My concluding remarks, one, we should aspire to have the rule of law in Uganda, and it is simple. The rule of law should be that bar on top of us, where everyone should subscribe to, that nobody should go beyond. If we set rules and say, okay, these shall govern all of us should be under those rules.
Thank you. And Nicholas, what's going to be your concluding remark tonight?
No, I think there was a video doing the rounds of my learned colleague and friend, brother Robert Chirunda, where he was quoting what the retired Justice Kanyahamba said at an event at the law school, that the law, you may not feel the force of the law, and you can use it to abuse other people until that time when you need it to come to your aid. When you try to grasp it and it just eludes you, I think you have to appreciate the rule of law, not just when you're seeking its aid, but when other people are being denied a chance. Because, and there's no better statement than Kaihura's lawyers before the General Court Martial talking about freedom, that freedom is so sweet only after you've lost it and you've regained it. So really, people who speak about the rule of law must understand that you need the rule of law to come to your aid tomorrow, to allow the rule of law to deteriorate in the country, and you're a bystander, you're not repudiating it, you're doing nothing to speak about it. It's coming, time will come when you need it and you can't find it. Lastly, is to say this, that the country is much better if we know the rules and that rule governs everybody. So that just because I have a government vehicle, I shouldn't drive on the other side of the road. I should be in the queue. I couldn't blare my alarm to pour my way through traffic. We should be on that road together and follow the rules.
All right. Nicholas Opio, human rights lawyer, executive director, Chapter 4 Uganda. Thank you so much. Francis Harumugasho, legal consultant, managing partner, Ahamak Advocates.
Kofisela.
Kofisela as well. Thank you, gentlemen. And you, the listener, I want to thank you for the privilege of your company. Good night and God bless you guys.